Tonight, we welcome to ASU one of the most important voices in this conversation, Professor Michael Eric Dyson. Professor Dyson is Distinguished University Professor of African American and Diaspora Studies in the College of Arts and Sciences, and of Ethics and Society in the Divinity School and the NEH Centennial Chair at Vanderbilt University. He is one of America's premier public intellectuals and the author of numerous New York Times bestsellers, including Tears We Cannot Stop, What Truth Sounds Like, Jay-Z, and most recently, Long Time Coming. A winner of the 2018 Nonfiction Southern Book Prize, Dr. Dyson is also a recipient of 2 NAACP Image Awards and the 2020 Langston Hughes Festival Medallion. Former President Barack Obama has noted, quote, "Everybody who speaks after Michael Eric Dyson pales in comparison." Hosting the event this evening are 2 new faculty members that I feel honored to call colleagues, Mitchell Jackson and Safiya Sinclair. Mitchell Jackson is the winner of the 2021 Pulitzer Prize in Feature Writing and the 2021 National Magazine Award in Feature Writing. He is the author of the award-winning novel, The Residue Years, and the critically acclaimed memoir, Survival Math, Notes on an All-American Family. Jackson's other honors include a Whiting Award, the Creative Capital Award, the Ernest J. Gaines Prize for Literary Excellence, as well as fellowships from the John Simon Guggenheim Foundation, the Coleman Center of the New York Public Library, the Lannan Foundation, the Ford Foundation, PEN America, and TED. Jackson's writing has appeared in The New Yorker, the New York Times Book Review, the New York Times Magazine, The Guardian, the Paris Review, Harper's, Time, and elsewhere. He serves as the John O. Whiteman Dean's Distinguished Professor in the English Department at Arizona State University. Safiya Sinclair was born and raised in Montego Bay, Jamaica. She is the author of Cannibal, winner of a Whiting Writers Award, the American Academy of Arts and Letters Metcalf Award in Literature, and the Prairie Schooner Book Prize in Poetry. Sinclair's other honors include a Pushcart Prize, fellowships from the Poetry Foundation, the Civitella Ranieri Foundation, and the Elizabeth George Foundation. Her work has appeared in The New Yorker, Granta, The Nation, and elsewhere. She is currently an associate professor of creative writing at Arizona State University. Her memoir, How to Say Babylon, is forthcoming from Simon & Schuster. Can't wait to read it. Typically, the run of show for an event such as this one asks our host and guests to lead the conversation for approximately 40 minutes and then turn the remaining time over to students for Q&A. Tonight, however, we will alter the plan just a little bit. Michael, Mitchell, and Safiya will discuss the book Long Time Coming for about 40 minutes. Then we will turn the event over to our students. But instead of simply asking questions, I've asked our students, Professor Dyson, to write a short paragraph or 2 explaining how Long Time Coming has shaped the way they read, think, and write about social justice. They will read these paragraphs to you to honor the deep impression your work has made on them as students and citizens. I've read each of these contributions, and I'm confident in asserting that the pursuit of racial justice is alive and well at Arizona State University. I hope you feel honored by this work this evening, Professor Dyson. Your contribution to our education, to say nothing of your contribution to American culture as a whole, signifies a singular generosity that should be celebrated now and well into the future. Before I turn the event over to you, Mitchell and Safiya, I'd like to thank Macmillan Publishers for sponsoring this event. I'd also like to thank our college leadership, specifically Dean of Humanities, Jeffrey Cohen, who inaugurated this year Humanities Week, which is taking place as we speak, and whose support for initiatives such as this one have been nothing short of exceptional. I thank my colleagues in the department who have helped make this event possible, specifically Kristen and Bruce. You're indispensable. And I want to especially thank my writing teachers, whose steady commitment to student success inspires me every single day. And finally, and most importantly, thank you to our students for providing us a reason to teach and thus a reason to hope. Safiya and Mitchell, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Kyle. And thank you so much, Dr. Dyson, for being with us. We're so honored to be in dialogue with you. Um, I'd like to start off by talking about the crafting of the book. Each chapter is a letter addressed to a Black person whose life was brutally snuffed out by white hands. You tell Emmett Till about Ahmaud Arbery. You tell Eric Garner about George Floyd, often weaving a double narrative and collapsing these unending parallels of Black death at the hands of white brutality. And sometimes you turn away from addressing the victims and speak directly to who you call your white brothers and sisters. I'm really interested in this rhetorical choice, and I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about your decision to use the epistolary form and letters directed to those we have lost in particular, and also why it felt important to you at times to turn away from that direct address of the epistolary form to address a white readership as well.
Yes, ma'am. Professor Sinclair and Professor Mitchell, thank you for this opportunity. All of the wonderful folk who are here, Sister Kristen, Brother Bruce, the Reverend Dr. Professor Kyle, and all of the other great folk who are gathered here. What a great honor it is to be here. This is what happens when your interlocutors are more distinguished than the person you bring in to speak. And by Professor Sinclair's brilliant and ingenious, what Immanuel Kant would call propedeutic, the introductory remarks, a kind of Walcottian moment here where she situates the double stitch of the narrative and the turning away like you're on camera and you addressing the people directly. I'm going to break faith with the genre and speak directly, because the compulsion to address white folk directly in the midst of the heat of the battle, in the midst of putative and ostensible allyship, to say this is so serious, I'm going to depart from this epistolary form to address you directly. But yes, to back up and acknowledge that in terms of craft, trying to raise my game every time out, I'm talking to Whiting and Pulitzer Prize winners, push cart. I pushed the cart once, I didn't get a prize. But the thing is, of course, is that in that epistolary form from Baldwin in more ancient times, speaking in the New Yorker, addressing his nephew to Brother Coates right now, and many others, Alice Walker, more famously in fiction, adopting an epistolary form, writing a letter to America, writing a letter to human beings, writing a letter because I wanted to speak directly to these people. Quite recently, a few days ago, I had the opportunity for the first time to visit the place where Emmett Till was thrown into the Tallahatchie River. And it was very moving and it was very powerful. And it confirmed for me, it affirmed my decision to write letters to these people, not simply about them. I didn't want to philosophically objectify them as a cog in the machinery of my own consciousness. I wanted to write to them as if they were still living and breathing in my spirit, in their own element, addressing us as I address them, their lives, letters to us, their sacrifices, moments of American note and observation to suggest something serious happened, often without their permission, often without their intention. Emmett Till didn't consciously sacrifice his life, though if his murderers are to be believed, when they sold their story for $4,000 some, not facing double jeopardy after they were acquitted in a kangaroo court in 67 minutes of deliberation by a jury, they said it wouldn't have taken that long had we not stopped to drink a Coke or a soda. And they admitted that Emmett Till, to the end, didn't believe that he was going to die, fought them, was humorous, was resistive, was defiant. So in that sense, sacrificial to the degree that he was incapable of capitulating before the altar of white supremacy and the logic of white dominance, and he refused to cede his life and legitimacy to them in his own 14-year-old Chicago way. And so I wanted to write stories, to write letters, to these martyred human beings, Elijah McClain, Emmett Till, and as you say, speaking about one to the other, Ahmaud Arbery, about whom Professor Jackson has brilliantly written. But to speak about death and to speak about triggering events and to talk about George Floyd and Eric Garner and to see the ways in which they are ineluctably interweaved into each other's lives. And as a genre of address, I wanted the literary form to serve a higher moral and spiritual purpose of mediating the presence of these figures to us, not as disembodied hobgoblins conjured by our collective fictions, but to see if we could be intimately associated with them through the measure of a word or a sentence or a paragraph or a revelation, or talking to them as if they were here, because for many of us, they are not ghosts, they persist in their presence to us. And so sometimes I wanted to break faith with that form to address white people directly, because as they say in the street, stakes is high. Stuff is tough. It's rough out here. And I want to say to white folks, so they didn't miss what I was saying. In case you don't understand what I'm trying to say, let me address you directly as my brother, as my friend, as my colleague, as my fellow sufferer, but also as a person to whom I'm writing to, tell tough truths, things that you may not want to hear, the discomfort that may arise as a result of engaging you. And, given the recent trends in certain social justice movements that protect people from discomfort. No, discomfort is the premise of education, is the predicate for expanded consciousness. So it made me uncomfortable. I would be very wary of a social justice movement that predicated comfort or progress on comfort when it sounds like Jim Crow language. It sounds like the same language that was expressed against Emmett Till. He made me uncomfortable. He looked at me, the reckless eyeballing, the ophthalmological invasion, the optic subversion of my existence. And so I wanted to directly address white brothers and sisters to say, this stuff is real. It ain't nothing nice out here. And we've got to confront this. And I wanted to do so in their humanity, but at the same time, asking and demanding a bit more to suggest that I'm willing to break this narrative, because what we're up against is so colossal, so mammoth. The behemoth brutalities visited upon the bodies of the vulnerable and the minds and spirits and souls of those who lay bare their own existence in pursuit of their humanity had to be addressed. So I hope that addressed some of the why I chose what I did and what I did.
Yes, you did. I'm so happy that you mentioned comfort, because one of the chapters that struck me was White Comfort, which is addressed to Sandra Bland.
Right.
And in that chapter, you talk about white people and their performative empathy. And it made me think, like, could I myself discern whether a white person's empathy was performative or not? And I wondered if you could speak a little bit about that performative empathy and like how we might distinguish, that from genuine empathy.
Right. No, it's a great point. And I'm hesitant even to do that. I'm telling on my age, because as a 62-year-old man, if I lived October 23rd to be 63, the Lord be willing and the creek don't rise, then, I'm hesitant about the pejorative connotation of performative, because Martin Luther King Jr. was performing social justice. He's figuring out, let me see, if I get this buffoonish white man named Bull Connor to unleash his water hoses of the fire people and the bicuspids and incisors of police dogs nipping at the flesh of Black people, that's a performance, because he knows at 6 o'clock when they sitting down to eat their meal and they have to watch the barbarism that is visited upon them. You know, you got to keep it away. Don't let the people see it. King provoked, among many other actors, Fred Shuttlesworth, Andrew Young, and in many different theaters, Robert Moses and Ella Baker and the like. He provoked a performance of both Black resistance to white supremacy and the performance of the lunacy of white logic of dominance, superiority that existed. He wanted to expose it, and he wanted to put it on the local news. And he did, and the national news, and he did it brilliantly. So I think performance is critical. I want to redeem performance. Mm-hmm. But I understand what young people mean when they talk about performative empathy. Like, and it is hard to tell, ain't it? I mean, kid, you ain't got no measure, no Geiger counter of authenticity. Oh, you struck the moral nerve, and that is authentic. Nope, you're faking over here. We don't know, because it looks the same. You know, I'm a Baptist preacher, so, you know, when you preach a sermon about Elijah wrestling with Jacob wrestling all night long, right? And in the morning, discovering that he's wrestling with an angel, because in the dark, the divine and the demonic feel the same. You don't know. You wrestling with God, you thinking it's Satan. You wrestling with Satan, thinking it's God. You don't know. For those who believe in that, who don't believe it's a conjured, projected imagination or whatever, right? A kind of projection of wish fulfillment of a Fourbacchian moment. So point is that you struggle all night long to the day so you can identify with whom and with what you are struggling. So sometimes we don't know it's performative till later, because sometimes people do it in a certain way and you think it's fake, but they doing it long enough, right, to get you to safety, to get themselves to safety. I remember, you know, that old story that said that and y'all have heard it a million times, when they're out in the woods and it's freezing out there and they see this bird and they put the bird in dung, right, to save the bird, right? And then the fox comes along and sees the bird in the dung, takes it out, but then eats it. And the moral of the story is, everybody to get you in the mess ain't your enemy, and everybody pulls you out ain't your friend. Mm. So the thing is, even the actions alone that feel hostile could ultimately be redemptive. So I think we have to test the spirits. We got to figure it out. We got to look at what your long-term goal and proposition is and what they are. And I think we have to trust people. We have to believe that they are sincere about what they say, but sincerity may not be the only motive that should be judged, right? You could be sincere and sincerely wrong. So the thing is, what's the consequence? What's the plan? What's the design? What's the goal? And the reason I'm also hesitant to assign such pejorative meaning to the performative, because the performative is inevitably tied up to the quick decision to render judgment. Right. And here I'm rubbing up against the cancel culture. And I don't mean the way Donald Trump and them complaining on the right wing. Oh, everything that they don't want. You know, you're stopping me from being a racist is cancel culture. You're stopping me from being a transphobic participant in the drama of Americans. You're a cancel culture. No, it ain't what I mean. I'm talking about, right, the inability to acknowledge that human beings are flawed and have foibles and make mistakes, and we should be redeemed. We should redeem each other. We should have enough space to have nuance and complication and overcome some of the things we do that are horrible to get to the best of us. And so sometimes we so quickly judge somebody. Aha, you are not fit to participate in this pageant of social redemption. Out, damn spot, and away. Well, slow down, Mace. Slow down, Mace. You're killing them. So give somebody a chance to develop, mess up, do the wrong thing, but then do the right thing. So I think we can only know if we look at the consequences, if we look at what the intention was as they self-express, and then move toward a point where it's not only, you faking like you down with us, but ultimately prove that you're not. And we can see it. It comes out in the wash. How much are you willing to give up? How much are you willing to sacrifice? How much are you willing to take inventory of your practices in corporate America? You want to put a black box on Instagram, but can you open up the black box where it's hidden the delicious goodies that are only distributed mostly to white brothers and sisters? How are you able to do these kinds of things in the midst of relations with people of color and others? So there's a way of telling, I suppose, but it takes a little bit more patience than you look a certain way, you did it a certain way, it jives with what I know, and therefore it's good. We got to look at the consequence, look at the fruit, look at what fruit it bears, look at what you're able to do, look at how much you're willing to interrogate your practices. And we tell pretty quickly, or at least quickly enough, where, I don't want to really give up my privileges. I don't want to give up what it means to be a male in a society where, we have demanded that toxic masculinity prevail. And I ain't really that serious about it. I'm just playing. I ain't that serious about surrendering prerogatives and so on. So I think at the end of the day, we're pretty much able to determine what's real or not, but we can't do it so quickly that we dismiss people's ability to feel their way through. Because sometimes people be faking at the beginning, then they get real. You see a pretty woman. If you're a heterosexual male, you go to church, you say, oh, but Jesus is here too, huh? Oh, okay. That's a bonus. The Lord, my soul might get saved. That's a bonus. I was just trying to holler at X, Y, and Z. And here I am meeting the creator of the universe, if you believe that. So your path there don't determine what your destiny might be, should you be open enough to pursue a particular route. So I'm always cautious about that, even as I acknowledge that some people faking the funk, ain't trying to do the right thing, and soon enough will be called out for it.
Well, thank you. Lady Macbeth and Mace, only one question. Professor Dyson, I do believe you are a poet.
Well, coming from a great one like you, that's deeply and profoundly rewarding and satisfying. Thank you so kindly.
Thanks. So in your really lovely prelude to Elijah McClain, you write that even white folk cannot truly enjoy the benefits of race or the democracy on which they're supposed to rest unless all of us ultimately are free, which seems, obvious to me, but isn't obvious to all. And I wondered if you could give us some more specifics of what to you that ultimate freedom in this democracy, or what that ultimate freedom for all might look like.
Yes, Professor. Well, think about January 6th. Mm-hmm. You kvetching and complaining if you were on the other side of January 6th, the people who felt that they were, disrobed of their identity, disarmed of their democratic rights. What? We had a duly sworn election, homie. Like, excuse me. While I kiss the sky. Since we're gonna throw in some poets, we can get Hendrix in here. The thing is that hold it. If real democracy prevails, all of us can participate in in real democracy. So on January 6th, you don't understand that if you try to deny Shaniqua and Jamal the right to vote, if you deploy vicious and devious and duplicitous and disingenuous stratagems of voter ID laws. Wait a minute, it was good enough for old man Bush to get elected and for young man Bush to get elected, but all of a sudden, when the Democrats in, you want to change up. So now you change the rules, the laws, the conventions, thinking you're going to enable yourself, but ultimately real justice is not done, real democracy is not had, because a real democracy says whosoever will. It's not that we are uncomfortable with the demand for a certain kind of standard to be met, but that can't be arbitrary or willy-nilly. That can't be unjust. That can't just benefit your group and not mine, because if it benefits your group and not mine, real justice is not done. The society society is not made whole. And the very people you think you're protecting yourself from will come after you. And that there will be ways in which you have to pay the piper, if not now, then later. So democracy is good because all of us have the right to participate, or your narrow finagling of things to rearrange artificially your spot in space in society undercuts the legitimate trajectory of what true justice is about. So, if I ain't participating in real democracy and I get denied, then there are going to be consequences. People get angry, they get upset, or the very thing, you keep people poor, but those poor people will come after you as well. And when you have such a vast inequality in the society, it's a drag on the American social compact and social contract. So January 6th, when you think you're doing the right thing because you're pissed and you're mad, but we see the hypocrisy. You tried to juxtapose an ontological assertion of philosophical depth, Black Lives Matter. That's a philosophical argument tied up in a mantra. Ontology, a big word that talks about being, right? Whether it's Dasein with Heidegger, or Jean-Paul Sartre, or Frantz Fanon, in terms of trying to talk about the psychoanalytic prism through which we view the wretched of the earth. So here you are trying to make an ontological assertion parallel to a professional status. Blue lives matter. Wait a minute, you ain't born a policeman, homie. And I know you've been in this force for a long time, but you ain't born with a badge on your chest and a baton. Well, okay. So the thing is that you're not born as a police person. That is an assumed identity. That is a profession. That is a job generated at a certain time and space in the collective history of the world. Whereas who you are as a human being, yes, we know. We listened to Jay-Z at the beginning. You was who you was before you got here, player. You might change, but that's just the top layer. So we can have, Middle Ages arguments about the character of identity and if it evolves and grows and the social construction of race or class or gender and the like. We can have all them kind of arguments. But at the end of the day, we're talking about one is an ontology, one is a profession and a status. And so now you messing the whole game up. You trying to say blue lives matter as if you were born blue. But here's the problem. When it came to January 6th, you were undercutting the police too, because you don't give a flying flip about blue lives matter. You care about whiteness, and whatever serves whiteness is what is good in your mind. But that undercuts real democracy. That's another concrete example where your deference and capitulation to your narrow conception of whiteness undercuts the legitimacy of true democracy that all of us should want to see prevail in order for all of us to be treated fairly and equally in this society. So just doing what you want to do because you want to do it because it's advantageous to you and yours doesn't begin to honor the principles and practices you claim to represent and uphold. And so that's why at the end of the day, in this part, we knew that the real religion in America for so many people is whiteness. The real democracy, the real governance is whiteness. The real treasure is whiteness. It's not the American flag, because they don't give a flying flip about that. And Colin Kaepernick, they want the Confederate flag flying, a sign of secession, a sign of disloyalty. You talking about Colin Kaepernick being disloyal? You've got the very symbol of a society that seceded from the Union. So not only is it disingenuous and contradictory, it ultimately puts handcuffs on the free flow of democracy, which we claim to be committed to. So those are a couple of instances of what we could, lay out as the contradiction between those two.
Oh, man, I could really I wish I didn't have to ask any questions so I could just hear you talk. But I know I got to ask a question to actually hear you talk. So I have another question. This one is about Emmett Till in the letter to Emmett Till. You mentioned Christian Cooper, who, for those who don't remember, was the man in the park,
right?
Who was trying to tell Amy Cooper to leash her dog, and she called the police on him. But I didn't even notice that she had apologized, and he accepted the apology. And when I read that, I thought about Botham Jean's brother accepting Amy Geiger's apology, and which made me think, like, what do you think about the necessity of Black people accepting the apology of whites after they've been affronted, and if that kind of apology acceptance is necessary?
Right. No, that's a brilliant point. Both of y'all together, y'all dynamite. I see why they recruited y'all together, ensemble. So the thing is that this is the utter humanity of Black people. That you go in a church in South Carolina and you mow down 9 people, and before the bodies are buried or the cadavers exhibit rigor mortis, Black forgiveness has been articulated to a young white supremacist who almost was derailed in his infamous design by the immediacy of love and fellow feeling, that he felt guilty about snuffing them out, not guilty enough to not do it. But he was arrested by that. He was stopped by that. He was chagrined by the love that Black people have. A white stranger in their presence, not knowing his ultimate evil end, but treating him like the very thing that he refused to acknowledge in them, human. And all of the stuff he had in his mind, that jumble of mythologies that he learned, radicalized online, is being denied by the very humanity of the people that he is about to kill. The very evidence against your beliefs breathe before you. And, I don't want to act as if Black people's humanity is deeper than anybody else's, but if we've done all this suffering, I got to argue that the humanity of Black people is transformative. In the same way that Paul Tillich, the great theologian, reserved a special spot for German theology, thinking that, hey, he was German, the Germans put it down in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, so hey, we the one, right? We got all the German and German influenced theology, Helmut Tillich, right? Karl Barth, Paul Tillich. We cold with ours. We just putting it down. So he felt a special breath of confidence in Germanic theology. Well, I'm gonna do the same with Black people's humanity. And I ain't saying we better than nobody else. I'm just saying in the midst of the onslaught against our beings, that America, sometimes you don't really be deserving us, because we come back not with hate or disdain, but love, not that simple, silly, prevaricating emotionalism that is not deeply committed to practices. No, love that is transformative and redemptive, that forgives us into a better humanity. And yeah, let me tell you, and this is my argument against cancel culture too, is that if you don't forgive, you can't be forgiven. Now, it's hard for us to swallow that. And I ain't talking about surface stuff. I'm not talking about, oh, you're forgiven and therefore you don't have to pay the price. No, that ain't what we're saying now. We're not saying you don't have to deal with consequences. As the great Abraham Yashua Heschel, the great rabbi, said, not all are guilty, but all are responsible. Right. Mm-hmm. So, when people say, I wasn't even here when your people were in slavery, but did you come here when you did and speak out against it? Or did you become complicit in it? I don't give a darn if you weren't here at the beginning of the road trip. If you got on at some destination, then you participated. Look, even the slavers, they dropped some off in the Caribbean. They dropped many more off in the Caribbean. Much respect to Professor Sinclair. They dropped many more off in the Caribbean than they dropped off in South Carolina. But the Negroes in South Carolina and in the Americas, out of exigency, out of necessity, out of the drive and demand of the enslavers, reproduced more rapidly and more expansively. Right? And so, it depends on where you got dropped off. That's why it's ignorant for us to say, you ain't really Black, you Haitian, you ain't really Black. You grew up listening to Bob Marley and not, Tupac Shakur, bruh. It's just a stop along the way. You could have been dropped off there too. You could have been, ce n'est pas difficile d'apprendre français, c'est facile. You could have been doing that, right? And not in French class because you were Haitian, or you were a Black person who was Francophone. So the thing is, these arbitrary distinctions that we began to edify, reify, reinforce. What did Benedict Arnold say? That nationalism is the kind of narcissism of petty differences. So the thing is that the forgiveness that Black people exhibit is a model of humanity. That yes, we must be held to account. Yes, we must own up to what we did. Because Black folk forgave that young man, but he's been tried for murder. I think they're trying to give him the death penalty, or have, and will certainly prosecute him and the like. It doesn't mean that we don't understand the legal consequences of certain actions, but it means that as human beings, we don't hold fast to the inability to acknowledge somebody made a mistake. Now, there was a young man, I'm not going to call his name, was a well-known influencer on social media. A white woman said, go back to your hood. He got mad. He found her boss and went to the boss and got the woman fired. And people were like, hey, is that really a use of your platform that is redemptive? I mean, just being vengeful against a particular woman. Hood, she didn't call you the N-word. She didn't, so there are levels to this, as Meek Mill would say. So we gotta look at what level you're operating on. And I think forgiveness is critical. Martin Luther King Jr. was crazy like a fox, ingenious, because he understood if we carried that poison within us, then what we did is allowed our enemies to implant in us the very logic of destruction by which they sought to eradicate us. And we can't buy into that logic. And so again, my argument against cancel culture is you trying to cancel something. First of all, cancel a subscription to a magazine. You can't cancel a human being. And then secondly, is that if Martin Luther King Jr. were here, some of the righteous woke people would try to cancel him, or Malcolm X try to cancel him. Like a lot of your heroes would be canceled because they were politically incorrect. They weren't saying what you thought they should have been saying. So yes, I think forgiveness is critical. And I think the forgiveness that Brother Cooper extended to Sister Cooper was extremely valuable. It models a certain behavior that you are not your mistakes, that we cannot freeze anybody in one particular moment. As Jesse Jackson said, you got to look at the box score. You can't look at one inning. Mm-hmm. What was the whole game? And not just one game. What was the whole season? Not just one season. What was your career? What was your average over 20 years? Like you could have had a bad day, a bad season, but the trend of your life moved somewhere more redemptive. Or you messed up and then fessed up and then dressed up. All right, sorry, I'm a Baptist preacher. I got to do it that way. So for instance, as I say in the book, when, Pharrell, the great entertainer, came to me because he's from Virginia and said, hey, I got some people, the Black politicians in Virginia want to rap to you because the governor done dressed up in blackface and they want to know should they oppose him. I said, hell to the no, to quote the great late Whitney Houston. Hell to the no. I said, no, you don't want to do that. Because there's nothing better than a white guy who's conscious that you've forgiven him for a sin or a faux pas. And now he's grateful for your forgiveness and therefore will work even harder on your behalf. I said, because you could get the next white guy up in there. Well, the next white guy had done blackface too, so it's pretty bad. but the third person had. I said, but you get the next white person up in there and go, hey, have you ever done blackface? No. Have you ever used the N-word? No. Do you care about Black issues? Not really. So you can have somebody doing the right thing in terms of not calling you a race, not calling you the N-word, and not using blackface. But wait a minute, when did the man do blackface? 20 years ago. Okay, that ain't yesterday. Although it trips me out, he was a doctor, right? Right. So what was he doing? He's going up into the surgery room with the cork on. This is not exactly what we meant when we said we want black faces in high places. All right, bro. We appreciate your effort, but that ain't what we were talking about. But 20 years ago, has he changed? Has he evolved? Has he learned? Has he understood that what he did was then problematic? And notice at the beginning, he was saying, I was really trying to act like I was Michael Jackson. But when it became apparent that they were going to take his job, he was like Shaggy. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. I don't know. It was not me, right? He borrowed from the Black diasporic transatlantic identity and dipped into the Caribbean waters and said, it wasn't me. I don't know what you're talking about, homie. So the thing is that we force people to lie and be disingenuous because they can't admit that they made a fault, because the moment they made a fault or a flaw or a foible, then we persecute them. So yes, I think Black forgiveness is redemptive to this country, has transformed American politics, and indeed made a stirring statement for the ability to acknowledge you messed up, you said you were wrong, let's together move in a different direction.
Thank you. I want to stay on this topic of redemption just a little bit. Because it's something that I struggle with, thinking about redemption and who gets to be redeemed and are there any limits to redemption? Yes. And so when I was reading chapter 2, The Blue Plague, while you were describing the atrocious actions of Derek Chauvin, you draw a line and mention Hannah Arendt's concept of the banality of evil, which, as I understand it, is the idea that evil acts are not necessarily perpetrated by evil people, but is simply the results of bureaucrats doing their job or simply taking orders. And Arendt's term, which she coined when she was watching the trial of Adolf Eichmann, whose defense of the genocide of millions of people was that he was simply taking orders. I'm really interested in this line you draw from Arendt's idea of the banality of evil to Chauvin's cold nonchalance as he puts his hands in his pocket as he's kneeling on George Floyd's neck and eventually kills him. Considering that later in the book, you also draw a historical line from slave patrols and the KKK to the modern iteration of police, do you believe that Black death at the hands of cops like Chauvin is the result of just following orders, or is there something more sinister, more intangible, something messier here in this idea of redemption?
God damn, where y'all get these professors from? Oh my God. Oh my Lord. Jackson and Sinclair, it's like a law firm, man. They're prosecuting the case. No, that's so powerful. And when you think about it, right, the callous disdain, the sadistic disregard for life. I'm an apparatchik. I'm Eichmann. That's what I do. And Jewish brothers and sisters were pissed at Hannah Arendt because they were like, you letting them off? And she said, no, I'm trying to show you it ain't just one evil dude. It's a system. And if we're serious about what we mean when we talk about systemic racism and systemic inequity, this is what we're talking about. That it's like Deus ex machina, right? It's the ghost in the machine. It ain't got to have somebody directing it. It's self-perpetuating. It's self-sustaining. It's in the system. Everything that ends in the word system. Public education system. Criminal justice system, right? Healthcare system. So the systemic character suggests that even when you have so-called evil points of departure or evil embodiments, or problematic ones, Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, if you will, right? That it is a system that sustains it so that no matter who's in charge, not that it doesn't get changed, not that the character is not different, but that it is the system itself that is being perpetuated. So Donald Trump is a figurehead, but systemic inequity and white supremacy undergird what he's doing. So your point about Hannah Arendt and Derek Chauvin is brilliant. The banality of evil, right? The everydayness of it, the quotidian character, the shrug, the hand in the pocket, looking at the camera, knowing you know the camera looking at you. You know the camera is recording you and you don't give a darn. You're doing your job as you believe you were taught, not having an ethical interruption of the moment to suggest that even if this is how I was taught, this has a lethal consequence upon the human being on whom I'm enacting this convention and rule. And as a result of that, the moral consciousness I possess should tell me to get up off of his neck. Or as you said, in the early 1703, 1704, slave patrols in Virginia and in America, the pedigree of policing derives genealogically, both in a Foucaultian and Nietzschean sense, derives from the slave patrols, and policing in America derives from that. Not necessarily so in British culture and the like, but in America, that's where it comes from, right? It's not no constable or noble. No, this is about going out catching people who have escaped, or those who got a pass to be out, but then they passed that time, and then sometimes they would kill, right, those Black bodies, and then the enslavers would be pissed. You killed one of my good slaves, and sue them in court. The only people who got reparations were the white slave owners. Ain't that a trip? But that's for another conversation. So the thing is that to see that direct line, you're absolutely right. It's a brilliant point, and it forces me to grapple with the fact that both on the one hand, it is about being part of a system. That's why it's not one policeman is good and one policeman is bad. That doesn't solve the issue. The issue is policing and the way in which it is deployed. It is the system itself. So when people are talking about, interrupting that policing, or when they're talking about cancel the policing or defund the policing, that's what they're trying to get at. They're trying to get at a system here that is operating, that officer friendly is nice, but what about if you don't confront officer friendly? What about if you find a police person who's not doing the right thing? Who's disinclined to observe the humanity of the person that he or she is policing? So you're absolutely right. I think Hannah Arendt gives us purchase on a kind of philosophical argument about a systemic inequity that disallows human feelings to interrupt on the job being done. And guess what? Derek Chauvin wasn't wrong, because for the most part, police got away with the murder. They could say, I felt uncomfortable. That's why I'm saying, how are you going to use that? Whether it's Me Too or whether it's anti-Black, fighting anti-Blackness, how are you going to use the very argument that they use? I was scared of you. You made me uncomfortable. I thought you were a threat. My Black skin was a threat. The epidermal threat, the very sighting of the corpuscles wrapped in this bronze beauty, you thought was a problem. It was an offense to you. So in that sense, Hannah Arendt gives us purchase on that systemic inequity, but it doesn't absolve people, oh, I'm just doing my job. No, you are to be held accountable both as a nexus and node that articulates evil, and we hold accountable the system that rewards you for that, that makes it mean something logical to you, and that defends you when you come to court. And for the most part, it was extraordinary. No police captain, no police chief usually stands up to argue against one of his cops. The police people who are his peers don't usually come. It took such in the Greek chorus of witnesses who were there. Look at the convergence, the perfect storm of so many things that had to happen just to get this man convicted. That lets us know right there that the system is working brilliantly as it was constructed to work. And that for the most part, it will not benefit the George Floyds of this life. It will benefit the other Derek Chauvins. So in that sense, we've got to flip Hannah Arendt and say that not only do we acknowledge the banality of evil and the persistence of a kind of systemic inequity, we've got to interrupt that system and to undermine it by saying it's not just individuals who are good, thank God for the good cops, It's the tendency of a system to do unjust things in the name of justice. And I think that's why the genealogical line from slave patrols to policing and from Hannah Arendt and Eichmann down to Chauvin and what's going on in that court has to be resonant and powerful for us and has to be nuanced and complicated. So yes, we borrow certain moments from Hannah Arendt, and then we borrow certain moments from Fanon, and we look at how we piece together a philosophical argument about evil and injustice that allows us both to acknowledge its systemic character and to hold individual actors to account as well.
I have one final question. We're going to turn it over to the students and to share their brilliant essays, but I wanted to hopefully end on a positive note. And one of the things that really struck me in the book was this idea of the Black necks, or actually coupled with the white again, but I'm going to put the white again aside for a second. And I wondered if you could talk about Black necks and what you think in the current moment we can do with the Black necks to kind of topple this white again.
Man, the professors y'all got, give them a raise. I'm just telling you. I'm telling you, give them a raise. They read closely. People don't be asking me these questions. I'm just letting y'all know now. This is the first time I've been asked most of this stuff that these two brilliant professors are talking about. I ain't even been asked. And I wrote it in the book, and it's there. I'm just telling y'all that. That's how closely they read. That's how conscientiously they engage these ideas. Yes, Professor. I wanted to come up with something that would be a convenient carrier for an idea about the relentless pursuit of the next option that Blackness represents. That you ain't going to exhaust us. You ain't going to beat us. You ain't going to put us in a corner. You're not going to deprive us of an opportunity or an alternative. That even when you think you've ended it, we got something else in mind. So to me, one of the great words of Black creativity is next. You're still us from African soil. What's next? What we're doing over here in the Americas, what's next? If we're in Salvador de Bahia, if we're in, if we are in Santiago de Cuba, if we are in Birmingham, England, or Birmingham, Alabama, what's next? What's next on the agenda? Then you take our freedom, and then we reinvent freedom. We began to focus a different understanding, as many historians have argued, that there would be no notion resonant of American freedom without American without Black people's unfreedom, without enslavement. It provided a superb and sublime opportunity, albeit at the cost of our existence for the most part, to juxtapose what was free and not free, what was real and not real, what was liberated and that which was enslaved. And our bodies were the examples of that, but we were also creating our own cultures in that. We created something that wasn't from Yoruba, that wasn't Nigerian. It derived from that, but it's something different. It's a tertium quid. It's a third thing, not the way Du Bois meant it when he talked about tertium quid, we were seen as animals, some freak of nature's. No, I'm talking about the combination of what happened in Africa and what happened in the native soils that we were forced into, and we created this third thing. This ain't what you're going to find. I mean, there are similarities in Blackness the world over, but there are distinctions, right? Fela Kuti is not James Brown, but he influences James Brown because he's influenced by James Brown. He comes up with something, Afrobeat is one thing, funk music is another. They have similarities and elective affinities, but there are distinctions that are made. And so what the American Black person has done is a distinct contribution. The British Black person has done is distinct, the Francophone, and on and on and on. So it's apparent, I think, that next is the creative engine of Black cultures the world over throughout the diaspora. So you rip off our slave songs, we come up with the blues. You rip off the blues, we come up with jazz. You rip off jazz, we come up with R&B, funk, hip hop. So far, they ain't got hip hop. So far, right? They got a couple people. But ain't nobody mistaken Old Dirty Bastard and Flavor Flav. We ain't seen the white variety of them yet. So, I mean, Eminem got to come, he got to be a genius to be up in our spot. You got to be a genius to represent up in our spot, because this thing is still dominated, even though dominated by us, even though when Eminem first came out, undeniably a genius. But when he first came out, I remember, I think it was either Newsweek or Time. I think it was Newsweek said, for the first time, hip hop has evinced poetic genius. Bruh, what? Where you been? Right? Nas was already it's only right that I was born to use mics, and the stuff that I write, it's even tougher than dice. I'm taking rap into a new plateau through rap slow. My rhyming is a vitamin hell without a capsule. Smooth criminal on beat breaks. Never put me in your box if your issues tapes. Son, where was you then? Where was you then? Or when Biggie is doing his thing, you know what I'm saying? This paged me at 5:46 in the morning, crack of dawn, and now I'm yawning, wipe the coal from my eye. That's a Mitchell Jackson short story. The breathing of pipes, the beauty and power of metaphor, the enjambment, right? And the elongation, the playing with syllables and so on. I mean, where you been? So no doubt that Eminem is genius, but you missing Black genius all along. And the power of poetry, right? Somebody wake me, I'm dreaming, Tupac said. Somebody wake me, I'm dreaming. I started as a seed, the semen, swimming upstream, planted in the womb while screaming. On the top was my pops, my mama hollering stop from a single drop. This is what they got. So the next in the vocabulary of Black creativity is powerful. So you take us, you block us from, after enslavement and Reconstruction, you take that away. What's next? We fight through the courts. What's next? We take it to the streets, even though Thurgood Marshall and Roy Wilkins and the NAACP thought you should do it in the courts. King said, no, we're going to do it on the streets. And then there, right? What's next? Black Lives Matter after the Civil Rights. What's next? It's the constant, relentless churning of Black possibility condensed into a keyword that summarizes the potency and the beauty of Black existence. So that to me is the Black next over against the white again. Make America great again, because they stuck in a cycle, right? They ain't turned the washing machine off. It just keeps on cycling again and again. So they want to do, hey, we had it with the Confederacy. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Let's keep our feet on their necks again. Let's find a new way. Oh, we did it this way in the 1860s. We did this way with the poll tax. In 1857, the Supreme Court, Black people have no right that white people are bound to respect. Let's do it again. Let's do it now again through, the vicious practices of voting chicanery. It's again and again and again and again and again trying to suppress. And Black people saying, what's next? Let's do it again. Let's figure out the next thing to figure out how to trump, undermine, subvert, get around, and create Black possibility as a keyword of our culture. So that's kind of what I had in mind on those two.
Just a little knowledge.
Just a little bit. You know what I was doing.
I love that idea of this hopeful looking forward, the Black futurity. Thank you so much for this conversation with us. As we're thinking about the future, I think we're now going to turn to the young people, the students who read your book, who have words that they want to ask of you and say to you. So the first student we have is Abdurrahman Ali.
All right.
1 second. Hello.
Hey.
My name is Abdurrahman Ali. I'm a first year here at ASU and a computer science major. And today I'm going to be speaking on a long time coming and how it has affected me. All right. As a developing young Black writer, your book has left a long-lasting impression on me. In high school, I read a lot of plays and fiction books and never read anything on social justice. None of what I read felt like it was for me. Books like 1984 were cool, but it was hard for me to connect to it. This may be why your book was especially powerful to me. It made me feel like there was a writer out there who understood my experiences and could relate to me. I'm excited to be here and to talk to you about how your book has impacted me. And I'm especially excited to tell you how not only your ideas impacted me, but your choices as a writer did too. Growing up, I never had much interaction with letters. So when I encountered your book, which is all letters, it really stuck out to me. You were able to revisit the tragedies that have befallen my people through a form of writing and genre that was pretty new to me. I think the mix of newness with the letter genre and the way in which I was able to relate to the experiences of Black people really made your book stand out. But that wasn't the only thing that made your book stand out. It was also your writing style and the way you're able to stitch these stories together so seamlessly with your use of the letter genre. In this day and age, letters are nearing obsolescence, with emails rapidly replacing them, leading me to think of them as trivial and outdated, but you've changed that notion. Your usage of the letter genre made us as readers feel more attached and emotionally invested in these stories of those taken by injustice. It also humanized the victims by telling their stories, showing people that they aren't just statistics, but people with families and friends, people who should have been taken away. I never would have guessed that the letter genre would carry so much weight and power within. The injustices you're able to express were gut-wrenching. You made it clear that the pain and ignorance that plagues our country are still present to this day. Your book was definitely a tough pill to swallow for many, but it's a pill that we need to take every day. I hope to see the day where we aren't treated as monsters, but as human beings, the day when we won't have to fear for our lives, the day when we see police officers as a representation of safety and not a threat of violence. As I continue to develop my ideas as a college writer, I hope to inform and help make a change on how Black people are viewed and help ease the stigma that surrounds us. While your use of the letter in your book really stuck out to me, what I really got from your book was the desire to tackle some of the issues you spoke on. Although as a computer science major, my focus will be on programming and dealing with data, but in my upcoming humanities classes, essays, and presentations, I hope to speak on these issues in an attempt to make a change and to spread awareness in my classes at the very least. Reading your book has made me think in a more socially conscious way and has made me take a more critical look on issues we are facing as a society. Thank you for your time and consideration, and it was an honor to share my ideas with you.
Bless you, my friend. Beautifully stated. Thank you so very kindly.
Thank you so much, Abdurrahman. Next, we have Charlie Murillo.
Hello there, sir.
Hey, how are you?
So I wrote my my essay in sort of a letter. Dear Dr. Dyson, I'm writing to you as someone who is a simple college student, but one who is determined to figure out their writing style. Your book, long time coming, served as a jumping off point for my writing style, as well as the way I show my support and effort for the Black Lives Matter movement. Back in the summer of 2020, protests were gaining traction in the Phoenix area, and even though I wanted to participate in them, circumstances did not allow me to do so. During this time, I found a lot of books talking about injustice in America. However, your book that I had to start reading for my English class this fall showed me a writing style that not only kept me engaged, but was something I looked up to as an inspiration. I enjoyed the way you recounted personal experiences in your book, and I've tried that approach in some of my papers that I've written so far in college. For example, in my English class, we had to write a paper that talked about literacy, and I talked about the violin as a literacy. That paper and seeing the way you used your experience was something that allowed me a new method of writing where I was able to use myself and my experiences as a source, and it was allowed. Typically in high school, I was only ever taught that even if I'm expressing my ideas, it would not make a good paper using myself as a source. But it was disproven by my college English class and by your book as well. I guess what I really want to say is that I appreciate your book a ton, and I like to think you have become a mentor from afar to me. I really am grateful for your time and allowing me to read my paragraph, but since I have your attention, there is this question that would mean a lot if you can answer it. Did you always know that you would recount your own experiences, or did writing the book make you realize that adding your personal experience will add more credibility? Thank you.
Thank you so very kindly. I'll be very brief in answering that. You're brilliantly figured out that it was the latter. It was the latter. I didn't know at the beginning. In fact, when I wrote my book, Tears We Cannot Stop, A Sermon to White America, I wrote 60 pages and my editor was like, we were fighting. I don't want to tell y'all how ugly it gets with your editors up here, but it was ugly. And I was like, what? I wrote 60 pages. You don't like it? And then I went to sleep and woke up and I said, dude, you're a preacher, preach to him. So that was one thing. And then writing the letter, I figured, let me just, as I'm writing, I didn't start that way. That's brilliant what you said there, because I didn't start off that way. I was writing, and then it kind of developed organically into, let me address them, not talk about them, but speak to them. So, as Brother Ali brilliantly articulated, the kind of personal and existential investment and what you've done in terms of, yes, it was extremely important for me, but it developed organically, and it was something after the fact. I wish I could look, yes, I started off to write that in that way. No, it developed, and then I said, all right, this is going to work. So that's what happened. And thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Charlie. Next, we have Courtney Caputo.
Hello, Dr. Dyson. I'm Courtney Caputo. I'm a junior studying English. And I think that one of the most important elements of this book is the fact that it is so deeply personal. You address your letters to murdered men, women, and children, and you reflect on their personalities, their loved ones, and their life histories. In the fight for racial justice, it is common to think of these people as symbols of injustice and nothing more. But your book is a powerful reminder that, above all else, these people were just that, people. After reading this book, I recognize more than ever the importance of asserting that these murdered men, women, and children were real people. Because as you point out, Black people are so often dehumanized both in life and in death. And when people debate about whether police should be allowed to kill someone, we treat that someone as an object or a threat. How often have we heard the argument that a police officer is somehow justified in killing a person because the officer wants to go home to their family? That argument almost never acknowledges that the murdered victims also had families that they wanted to go home to. In order to combat racial injustice, we need to attack the dehumanization of Black people that allows some people to think only about a white aggressor's family, but not a Black victim's family. I think that everyone should seek out learning resources that recognize and embrace Black humanity like your book does. At least in my future reading, writing, and learning, I will definitely emphasize the humanity of the people that you write to in your book and the many, many others for whom we seek justice. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. So moving, so powerful.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Next, we have Jose Pena Galvez.
Hello, Professor Dyson. My name is Jose Pena Galvez, and I'm a psychology student. As a new Latinx student at Arizona State University, your book, Long Time Coming, resonated with me because it has advanced my thoughts about reimagining the policing system in the United States. For a long time, our country has been plagued with various issues such as racism, homophobia, and xenophobia. Regardless, there have always been social activists, such as yourself, who have fought for change and have succeeded. While the book portrays ideas such as the uninterrupted history of systemic racism in the United States, your sentimental diction and contagious style serve to provide hopefulness after a devastatingly powerful book. As a psychology student, I see a lot of parallels within your writing that reflect expressive therapy, a style of therapy that uses forms of creative expressions, such as writing, to help patients gradually erase the feeling of their emotional trauma. Although the book can be labeled as an epistolary novel, your direct methodology of writing specifically to victims of the Blue Plague impacted me because it fosters an understanding that the act of writing provides structure to grief, allowing us to progress from being overwhelmed by waves of tremendous feeling to comprehending and absorbing the experience. All in all, your writing persuades first-generation students like me to continue to strive for reformation within a system that does not often reward goodwill and compassion. Thank you very much for listening to me and for continuing to preach Black Lives Matter.
Thank you so very kindly, my friend. Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. Very moving.
Thank you, Jose. Next, we have Jaden Parker.
Good evening, Professor Dyson. My name is Jaden Parker. I'm an acting major. And so you have shown in your book that the power of a person, of people, and of words are one and the same. In Long Time Coming, you emphasize the horrors faced by the Black community, something that isn't a new idea or hard to see. However, you do this by using rhetoric in a way that allows the reader to see how horrifying oppression can take shape. One of the best examples is when the hunting of Ahmaud Arbery is illustrated by you in the book. You use visceral descriptions, feeling, anger, and important details to bring the reader into the moment. During the chase, there is a moment when the car turns back towards Ahmad. The terror on his face sets in, and it sets in with the reader as well. In doing so, you also illuminate how the camera person is just standing there while all this plays out, leading to anger and distress in the reader. You highlight the issue with digital phones is that sometimes we get caught up as spectators instead of allies. You do this constantly throughout the book, taking moments readers have heard of, but really bring the reader into these experiences. It is a powerful way to build empathy and spark change, something that you use powerful words for over and over again. The depiction of the person filming Arbery's murder made me wonder what's important is sometimes it gets blurry, but getting a video out to the world or stepping in to try and help, because I think it varies case to case, but I think that's a difficult question to sometimes answer in the moment.
Right. No,
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so very kindly. Very powerful. And may I just add briefly, that's what Darnella Frazier faced. And she was accused of the young lady who recorded the video, but look at the good she did to the world. If grown men and women, but grown men were being denied the opportunity to help Mr. Floyd, what was a 16-year-old girl going to do? What she did by using that camera was to speak a language, a visual language of identification with a vulnerable human being that helped to transform history. So I think that's an extremely important point you're making. In her case, she made the right decision. Thank you so much for your essay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Jaden. Next, we have Caitlin Lane.
Hi, Dr. Dyson. My name is Caitlin Lane. I'm a psychology major, and I'm really honored to be able to speak with you today. So as I sat down to write about how your book and your writing has affected me both as a person and a writer, I honestly was not even sure where to begin. My class has only gotten to chapter 4 of Long Time Coming, and it has changed my way of thinking and writing in so many ways. To put it plainly, your writing makes me want to write. For me, Long Time Coming is filled with eye-opening concepts and ideas that range from racial injustice and police brutality to white privilege and the failures of our justice system. Ideas that I found to be what I've come to call light bulb moments. For whatever reason, chapter 4, Seeing Red, particularly stood out to me as one of these moments. You take a deep dive into cancel culture, and I was amazed by how little I actually understood cancel culture. The way you described it and talked about it opened my eyes, and that light bulb went off. Suddenly, the realities of cancel culture as a movement became clear to me. Before reading your work, I felt like the ways in which I saw cancel culture circulating on social media was essentially doing something positive in society. But when you mentioned that cancel culture wipes out the individual and leaves the system still standing, it was like I took off the rose-colored glasses. I encountered so many different definitions of cancel culture and the different ways it was being used that it blurred what cancel culture was for me. The way you wrote about cancel culture complicated my understanding of something that I thought I understood. You spoke about how cancel culture was temporary justice, but if it left the system still standing, it wasn't meeting its goals. I guess what I'm trying to say is the way you wrote about cancel culture was a defining moment for me. And not only did it complicate cancel culture for me, it made me realize that writing is incredibly powerful in its ability to create light bulb moments. The way you write and articulate ideas has changed my way of thinking and writing. You have taught me not to just look at issues and only having two sides, and to also not be afraid to complicate them. Issues need to be complicated, and they need to be looked at from all angles to truly understand them and their impact, whether positive or negative. As someone who is thinking about going to graduate school for psychology, your work has taught me something extremely valuable. Your work has made me realize that in order to have these light bulb moments, we need to listen, learn, and digest the ideas of others. And I hope that I can write some of my own light bulb moments that others can also connect to, much like I did with yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lynn. Thank you so very kindly. Beautiful.
Thank you, Caitlin. Next, we have Whitney Ulrich.
Hi, my name is Whitney Ulrich, and I'm a psychology major. In English 101, when we started to read your book, the opening words left a strong impression. After barely reading the first chapter, I noticed your word choice to express your pain and suffering using words like heartbreaking, cruelty, and barbarism. Throughout your book, your writing understands how each featured individual story demonstrates a larger and more general experience for the Black community. Your tone reaches out to the reader and touches the heart to effectively create a bond with the reader and help us to feel the emotional component in the stories we hear on the news. Your choice to write in letter form also helped the reader form attachment and really feel the horrific actions that took place, creating an emotional bond with a real person and not just a name we read as we scroll through our phones. In the chapter Blue Plague, you wrote, "What is clear too is that the cops are often needlessly disrespectful, that they desire our skin and breath, that they rain down on our bodies waves of gratuitous violence, that they have no regard at all for our safety and protection, that our lives are so little to them that it makes no difference if they execute a warrant or our flesh." Recently, I watched a viral video of a student interaction on campus that took place in the Multicultural Center, and my mind was drawn back to this section of the book. In class, we discussed if you were suggesting a solution in this chapter, and my impression that you were rather intending to bring the audience into the experience of terror of police brutality. Later in the book, you also caution against cancel culture as a way to bring effective solutions by saying that cancel culture promises justice but delivers chaos. I'm exploring these two ideas in my current project for class and thinking through the complicated sets of reasoning and life experiences that are interaction between students. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on pursuing the best outcome for all involved. In a university setting, what would you recommend as the most efficient way to approach someone with a different belief that is both upsetting and challenging?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me very briefly answer. That's an excellent essay. And I think this is the value of a university. As I told my son, when you go to college, don't talk to people whose last name ends like yours, who smell like you, who talk like you, who think like you. Engage difference. That's the permission of college, is to talk across axes of race and gender and class and sexual orientation and color and region and religion. And the best way is to protect everybody's right to say what they have to say. Now, there are some extreme instances when people are inciting violence that should not be permitted. Short of that, even if it's offensive, even if it's problematic, engage the idea, talk about it. If Dave Chappelle's comedy special is problematic, speak about it. What is he saying? Why is it problematic? How do we unearth some of the principles that we think are needlessly contagious in a negative way and those that are helpful in a positive way? So I think what we should do in a university setting is to prevent people from denying access to a microphone of people with whom they disagree politically, socially, or otherwise. And to preserve that right is the precious heritage of learning in the American Academy, and at nearly any expense, we should seek to preserve it. But thank you for your essay. It's very powerful. And good luck to you too. All right. I want to read what you come up with because I can learn something from you.
Thank you, Whitney, and thank you, Professor Dyson, for that answer as well.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we have Erin Slutsky.
Hello, my name is Erin Slutsky, and I'm a communications major. So this culmination of letters to the Black individuals slain by not only the people charged with the duty of protecting them, but normal white citizens as well, has been a literary experience I have never encountered. Each chapter holds different lessons made more powerful within the framework which reminds us of the actual individuals impacted rather than the general population. The most important point that you make early in the book, which I believe is easily forgotten, is that these individuals brutally taken from this world, their purpose was not to die to push this deeply depressing and disconcerting narrative that has existed for centuries. Their lives should not have to be taken to achieve progress and bring attention to a campaign attempting to justify their very right to exist. Throughout the book, you also describe a concept that I think I subconsciously knew existed, but I never truly understood its profound impact: the generational inheritance of trauma on Black individuals. Through your writing about the vicious consequences of slavery's legacy on page 130, you identified the impossible situation of living in a country that after centuries of looting your bodies, described your enslavement as a necessary evil. This impossibility has forced me to realize that the problem of systemic racism in America is not just about stopping police brutality and re-educating a racist population, but learning how to listen to the trauma that Black individuals have endured and finding a way to exist with this impossibility. How do we listen and aid a youth that realize they are but a corpse in the making? How do we in our communities support and ease this racial insomnia? How can we bear witness to the testimonials of a population whose existence is consistently threatened merely due to the color of their skin? Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you so kindly. Very moving. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erin. And now we have our final essay or question from Alex Suvorov.
Hello, Dr. Dyson. My name is Alex. I'm a freshman at ASU, and I'm a mechanical engineering major. After reading A Long Time Coming, it really resonated with me. It was a very new and refreshing writing style. It was the letter form. It was very innovative, and I really enjoyed it. I felt like I really connected with it. And the chapter that really stood out to me was Blue Plague. The chapter that focused on the dreadful crimes and murders committed by the police on African-American men and women. Later on in the chapter, you bring up very powerful and influential evidence to support your thesis. The evidence being the names of all the victims of police brutality. There was a whole page dedicated to that. Personally, this was one of the only pieces of literature that truly hit me with a gut punch of realization of how much there's wrong with the world today. A gut punch of realization that every single one of those names carried meaning. They carried a life story. The life story is filled with feelings, connections, aspirations. And it was very difficult, but eye-opening to read that. My question for you is, how did you approach and what was it like putting together and writing those names with the emotional and heavy weight that every single one of them carries?
Yes, sir. Thank you so very much for acknowledging that. And I felt the same as you feel. It was heavy. It made me, I cried at points, to tell the truth. Just to the roll call, just the mere naming of human beings. As you said, each name, a family, not just an individual, but a family affected, people impacted, grief increased, hurt and pain shared, the shearing of possibility, the eradication of hope, the denial of the right to live. And so in putting those names together and thinking about who they were, and I knew that the cadence of citation itself, the putting of the name on the page, and to let it stand for itself, period, name, period, name, period, a life beginning and ending, a first name and a last name or a middle name, but also a complete life snuffed out as quickly as that next person on the page in the paragraph was cited. And so I wanted to communicate that somehow, both in terms of literary craft, both in terms of appeal to emotion, but also a recognition that the dehumanization of people often comes from rendering them anonymous. And I wanted, at least for that second that it took to recall their name, to say it in your head, to allow it to resonate in the chambers of your memory even, that they would be recalled, that they would be remembered.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Very powerful.
Thank you, Dr. Dyson, for such a wonderful, enlightening, engaging, critical, reflective, inspiring conversation. Thank you to all of the students who read the book and came up with those wonderful comments and questions, essays. I also want to say thank you to Dean Jeffrey Cohen for sponsoring this, and also to Kyle Jensen, obviously, for putting this together and for those wonderful introductions. Also, thank you to Peter Jansen and Byron Echeverria at Macmillan, who got us those books and keeps Dr. Dyson going all around the country, having these brilliant conversations. I feel enriched from tonight's experience, and I want to thank you again and thank everyone for coming out and spending some time with us.
Thank you. If I can say, I'm just honored by everybody here, the students' incredible insight and passionate and poetic expressions, to all of the various folk that we've already named, that you've already named, and of course, especially to Professors Jackson and Sinclair. Thank you so much for your rare elegance, your genius, and your ability to evoke responses that really were greater than even what existed before you came into dialogue with me. So I'm grateful and honored by your taking the assignment seriously, and appreciate that. Look forward to seeing y'all in person, as well as the other students sometime soon. But thank you for this opportunity.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.